We're here today to talk about maintenance and adjustments for your 2-post and your 4-post lift. We get a lot of calls in at the office about what I need to do to my lift to keep it safe and working properly. Fortunately, there isn't a lot you have to do, but there are some things you should watch. I'm going to start off with the anchors. On our 2-post lift, there are anchors that hold each of the columns in place. You'll find them at each end of the post. Now, once they're installed, they've been torqued for their initial torque. But what you need to do, I'd say at least once a year, if the lift's brand new, I'd probably do it within 3 months, is recheck the torque. Now, the industry standards fluctuates from all the different manufacturers, but we recommend 70. If you go each anchor and check the torque to 70, that's where we'd like you to keep it. And then once you've done it, maybe 2-3 times the first year, then you can go to once a year. That's actually an inspection standard that every year during inspections, the torque has to be checked. They seem to settle. I found out even on my own lifts, after about a month, they need to be retorqued. The next thing, which probably is going to require your maintenance, I'm going to raise this lift up a little bit, is the adjustments of the cables. You have 2 cables. The one starts at the top of this column and goes to the bottom of the opposite column, and the other cable starts at the top of that column and comes around to the bottom of this column. The full function of the cable is to equalize the lifts. They do not lift the vehicle. The cables are not designed to lift the vehicle. They're what you call equalization cables. I'm going to set it on the locks. Now, the easiest way to check your cables to see if they're adjusted right is just to reach up and pinch between the 2. You should be able to touch them, but it should take an effort. They shouldn't just flop together. There is no exact torque setting. And once you get them close there, then we do what we call the timing. Now, these cables are gonna, because they're a spun cable, they're gonna stretch a little bit initially. So this is something you're gonna have to do probably within the first 6 months of owning your lift. And then after that, maybe once a year you can check them. Or you can just check to see if they're tight. Now, when it goes up, you notice the columns are moving together. Here are the locks. They're engaging simultaneously. That means these cables are pretty well adjusted. Now, that being said, when you put a car on here, you may get a difference. Like this one may click first, then that one follows. Or that one may click first, and this one follows. That's all very normal because the car is not going to be perfectly balanced on this lift. Right now, it's balanced because these carriages and arms all weigh the same. But the main thing, you want to hear both locks engaging. It's very normal. Don't think you need to readjust your cables just because they're out of time a little bit. Here's an issue that we have mostly with commercial lifts. We'll see the mechanic in the shop with a vehicle here with just this side's arms underneath the car, picking it up at an angle. Maybe to fix a flat, maybe just to look underneath it. But a 2-post lift is designed to use all 4 arms all the time. You want your lift to last? Take the time, set all 4 arms, pick it up, even if you're just taking off one tire. Do not use this lift like a jack. The cables are not designed for that. The anchors are not designed for that. The columns and posts are not designed for that. Okay? That's a safety issue. And also, it'll keep your lift lasting a lot longer. If you do need to adjust the cables, on this one, because it's a chain over, the cylinder's in the way of getting to the stud on the end of this. This is your adjustment here. This is the adjuster for this side, and this one adjusts on this side. Again, I always like to adjust my cables when it's on the locks because that's where it's balanced. Now, I'll show you on this side, because we're above it, get a little stool or ladder, you can reach in here. This is a long threaded stud. You can grab the shank and be able to get a wrench on there to tighten up. And as you're tightening this up, you'll feel this cable here getting tighter. Whatever you do to the one side, I would do to the other side. Clamp it, adjust it, and this will start getting tighter. And it's just a balancing act. Like say you do 4 turns on this, do 4 turns on that. Then reach up and feel if you're getting more tension. And once you get the tension you want, then just run it and listen to your timing. Timing doesn't have to be dead on. Like a click, click is no problem at all. You're probably going to get that with a vehicle on it. There are no grease points on this lift. Most tube posts don't have any grease points. But what you do need to do is lubricate. If you look on this lift, you'll see there's a red grease on this pin. When it was assembled, the pin was greased and the surfaces where the pin goes against were lubricated. I would recommend once a year, and this is whether you're a homeowner or it's a for commercial use. Just pop the snap ring off there, just wiggle the arm, see how easy that pin will pop out? That's because it was lubricated. Just put a thin film of grease back on the pin, slide it back in, and put your snap ring back on. Do that in all 4 corners. Over the years, and as long as the arms aren't sagging, the lift pretty much is stable. But if you don't grease this, even this little bit of movement you get by pushing it in and out from under the car will wear the surfaces of the carriage, the arm, and the pin. And to replace all 3 of them to get back, you pretty much have the cost of a lift in it. So if you keep these lubricated, you will never have any wear. Also, see how easy this moves? Get behind here. I've seen arms that weren't lubricated where the mechanic physically has to take his foot and kick the arm underneath. Well, that's all because of friction. When you cause friction, you're causing wear. So please, lubricate these pins. They should be lubricated when it was installed, and once a year, put another thin film of grease on them, and that should be more than enough. I took the cover off this lock to show you this side. Both locks will be the same. You want to make sure your locks are engaging. There's a spring on this lock that causes it to flip in at every window. Okay, this is metal to metal here. I like to take it off the locks. I just always have PB Blaster with me, and I just hit it, move the pin back and forth, make sure it's nice and free. And when you put the lift down to grease your arms, yeah, I even like to grease these little rollers. This is metal to metal. That's your safety release cable. And you'd be amazed how much easier that makes that release when you have these rollers lubricated. You do have one at the top at each end that would take a ladder to get up, but just spray it with something. Some lifts won't have spin-up adapters, but if they do, you don't want to put so much on that it drips onto the floor, but if you just give it just a tiny bit at one spot, that makes it easier for them to spin. Be amazed how much dirt from these being underneath the car, especially if you're working on the car, gathers around them threads and then clogs them from working. It's not a maintenance tip, but it's a safety issue. To make sure it works is your overhead switch. All lifts that have an overhead bar, padded bar, and this is an inspected. This switch here is designed to cut off the lift if anything hits it. I personally just like to check that every once in a while because you don't want to find out it's not working when you're crushing the top of a van or something against your lift. So now you damage your lift and your van. So it's always good to check that. Simple things. If you were to do all this and take the time, you probably only have maybe an hour and a half tied up in it. Once a year, it's not a bad maintenance for a lift that's done a ton of work for you.